Hello Wargamers and welcome to Let's Get Critical. My name is Gar. Now in this video I will be painting the Shrine statue. The Shrine statue is a terrain piece that came with the Blood and Zeal expansion box for Kill Team. There will be 3 separate videos for this terrain piece, but in this first video I'll be showing you how I created the bronzing effect. Now this is the statue after it had been assembled, and this is what it looks like now after painting. If you want to see how I achieve this look, then sit back, relax, and let's get painting. The first colour I'll be using here is a colour from Citadel Colour. It's a base colour called Warplock Bronze. And the brush is the cheap graduate brush that I bought from the hobby store for about £3. It's great for priming these sorts of models. There are several ways which you can prime a model. Some people like to use spray cans with spray paint, others like to use airbrushes. I prefer using a big brush. And what you do is you just load some of the paint onto the brush and you wipe most of the excess off the palette. And then using those large bristles, you just very roughly just, get it over the nooks and crannies and cover the model with a layer of paint. It took 2 layers of paint to prime this, but you'll see me here just doing the first layer of paint. Once you've done one good coat like you see here, you just move on to the next section of the model. I then moved on to the back of the wings and started painting there, just using the large bristles to apply a thin layer of paint. And then when the paint runs dry, you just add more paint and take off the excess and carry on going. And you just keep going, spreading the paint around until you have a very thin layer. And then when that's bone dry, you just go and start it again. After the wings, I moved to the front of the model and started concentrating on the face. And as you can see there on the wings, you'll see some grey sections where the paint, hasn't covered it, but don't worry about those. Keep the paint thin and you'll just get those on the second coat. The first coat's just all about getting good coverage, and the second coat's about finishing it off properly. When I went down to the base here, I stopped doing a brushing motion, started doing a stabbing motion. Another thing about having a big brush like this with these massive long bristles is that you can do this, and you just basically you stab it in there into all the eye sockets and into all the pieces, and then once you've got lots of paint on there, you just start doing a very rough circular motion going round and round, and then keep adding paint to the brush and keep going till it's got a good layer of coverage. After I'd given it this first layer of paint, I then went and gave it the second layer, and then I moved on to the next section where I started to do some dry brushing. The next colour I chose to use was a layer paint from Citadel, and it's called Castellax Bronze. And for the brush I chose to use the Citadel large dry brush. I'm not sure if any of you, have done any dry brushing before, but I'll just quickly go through what you'll need. You'll need the paint and you'll need the brush, and you also need some kitchen roll. And what you essentially do is you get some of the paint on the brush, and then you use the kitchen roll to wipe most of it off, and then you just start flicking it over the model. The idea is you have a big brush with some big bristles, with a very, very little amount of paint on them, and you flick it over the model to catch all the raised areas and leaving the other colour you use, the Warplock Bronze, down in the recesses. Dry brushing is a really effective tool to learn, and it's great for bringing out the detail and highlighting and just adding a real sense of depth to that model. Once I'd done the front here and I'd done the side, I then moved on to the wings. And you can see from the wings here that I was following, the direction of the wings very gently. The trick to dry brushing is being exceptionally gentle and not having too much paint on the brush. And I'm doing this to catch all of the raised areas and just to really, really show off the details in those wings. I then switched over to the other side once I'd done that, and I got some more paint, wiped the excess off, and then I started to go essentially, in the opposite direction. Rather than generally following the pattern and direction of the wings, I was going up and down the wings, again really emphasising those raised areas and really giving it a good overbrush, a good dry brush coat of that Castellax Bronze. After I'd done the top of the model, I moved down to the base, and you can see here, you know, how it's really affecting the base of these skulls. It's really bringing out the detail, and on these skulls it's just really making them pop, and they start to look fantastic. And here's the model here. It's had 2 coats of the Warplock Bronze as a primer, and then it's had a good solid overbrush of the Castellax Bronze, a dry brush, and I think it's starting to look brilliant, and you can see the glimmer and the bronze effect to it. Next, we're going to start shading this model and adding a bit more depth and realism. The next paint is a shade paint. It's by Citadel Colour. It's a shade paint and it's called Agrax Earthshade. And the brush I'll be using is another brush. It's from Citadel and it's called the medium shade brush. The Agrax Earthshade is a very, very popular shade paint from Citadel. It's one of my favourites. It's great from adding like a dirty and earthy tone to models. Here I'll be using it all over the model, and what you do when shading, if you've never done it before, is you use a large brush to apply it, and you give it a nice liberal coat of the shade, but what you don't want to see are big massive pools, so you just keep spreading it around and making sure that it doesn't pool too deeply, and I just go around here doing the full model with a liberal coat of the shade. After I'd done the front of the model and the body and the face, I moved down to the skulls at the bottom. Here, you know, it doesn't matter being a bit too rough at the bottom and a bit too liberal. It's because this is where all the dirty water would run down to. So down here at the bottom, I applied a slightly thicker coat, and I wasn't too bothered about the pooling, and I wasn't too bothered about it looking, you know, thick, because that's how it would look when all the rain and the dirt, you know, came down to the bottom of the model. And then after I'd done the body and the base, I then moved on to the wings. The wings, I wanted to be careful because, you know, there wouldn't be many pools. When it rained and when there was some dirt, it would just flow down. So I did just give it, you know, quite a thin coat, and I spread all the Agrax around. But you can see here how it seeps into the recesses and how it adds a level of depth and dirt to that model, and gives it a really, really good realism effect, and I think it starts off absolutely fantastic. I love shading models, and I love Agrax Earthshade, and I really enjoy doing this one as well. It's a great model to paint. I'm loving it. And here I am at the end, and I'm not now applying shade. I'm just basically using the brush to take off the major pools and just making sure there isn't too much on there. As you can see, I'm just spreading the final bits around and getting rid of all of the puddles and just giving it a final gleam and making sure that it doesn't look too overly puddled and left with horrible pools everywhere. And then I move on to the final piece, which is a highlight dry brush. The final colour I'll be using is another Citadel colour. It's a layer paint and it's called Sycorax Bronze. And for the brush, I'll be going back to the large dry brush from Citadel to finish off and do a final highlight. And the process for doing this is very much the same as the dry brush we did in the other chapter, the Castellax Bronze, but you want to make sure there's even less paint on the brush. And when you're actually doing this and you're flicking it over the model, you need to be exceptionally gentle and even lighter than before, because you're doing this just to highlight and just to catch those raised areas and add the final finishing touches to the bronze effect to make it look absolutely superb and to make it look really, really weathered and fantastic. And I can't emphasize enough, the trick here is just the tiniest pieces of paint. Get it off the brush so there's practically nothing on there, and just ever so gently just keep flicking it over the model. And here you'll see I'll start working on the lower sections to the statue, and just super gently, using all the finesse in the world, just keep going, flicking it over until you're happy with the change in colour, until you can start to see the, you know, the drastic improvement in dimension that a highlight dry brush can offer. I'm doing this wing now as well just to show you how quick it is. This takes about 30 seconds. You load some paint, a tiny bit of paint, you get it off and you just flick it over the wing, and you have to have faith in the final effect of the dry brush, because literally after 30 seconds of dry brushing, that's it, it's finished, you know, it's been highlighted. And one more time, because it's so quick, I'll show you on the back of the wing. You know, you just load the brush, you get most of it off, and you just flick it over. About 20 to 30 seconds is all it takes, and you really just have to have faith. It's all about just trusting people like myself, showing you and telling you that after 20-30 seconds and a once over coverage, it's done. It's highlighted. You've done your first dry brush highlight. And here's the finished product. This is the statue after it's had the full bronzing effect of a Warplock base coat, and then a Castellax Bronze overbrush with an Agrax shade, and then a final highlight of the Sycorax Bronze. And that's the model. I think it looks absolutely brilliant, and I'll show you the base as well. Down at the bottom here, those skulls are popping, and I'm going to leave the video there. I am going to do a second video on how I weathered it with Nihilic Oxide, and then a third video on adding blood for the blood god to make it look desecrated. But for now, my name is Gar. Thank you for watching Let's Get Critical. Have a nice day. Bye bye.